Hello and welcome to the Finance Chief Podcast, your place for real, honest and insightful discussions about finance leadership, technology, strategic success and more. I'm your host, Matt, and I'm really looking forward to diving into today's conversation with you. We've got a good one coming up as we explore the intricacies, challenges, opportunities, and everything around that when it comes to building a modern payments infrastructure. I've got a great expert by my side, thankfully, to steer us through the topic and shed some light from the perspective of a CFO. I'm joined by Benyam Hagos, CFO at Form3, as well as Chairman and NED for Trust Payments. Now, Benyam is a finance leader who has spent nearly 2 decades navigating the intersection of corporate finance, legacy banking, high-growth fintech, and he brings over 17 years of deep industry experience to the table. Today, he is CFO at Form3, a cloud-native account-to-account payments infrastructure provider trusted by major Tier 1 banks and fast-growing fintechs globally. Benyam, finally we get to you. It's great to have you with us. How are you doing?
Thank you. No, great. Thank you. I didn't realise it's near 2 decades, but yes, thank you.
I like to put a reminder in at the beginning to have some grounding. Hopefully a good 2 decades, hey?
Yes. Yeah, let's see.
How are things going? How's the world of finance treating you? Dare I ask, are you keeping busy?
It is busy, but I think it's one of the times in the ecosystem now where it's exciting. So looking at growth globally, seeing the UK reform and challenge to grow more as a British business is really exciting to be.
Good stuff. Well, let's harness some of that excitement, shall we, and have a cracking conversation. Obviously, we're here to discuss building a modern payments infrastructure, which is quite literally the foundation that the Form3 is built on, I guess. So you're well versed in that. Why don't we get started and kick things off with a context question? Really, over to you. How are banks re-architecting for modern payments demands? What are you seeing there from your perspective?
I think if you think of how a bank works, infrastructure is critical to what they do. Banks need to make sure that payments work well every time on time. There are billions of people making payments every single day, and it's critical to how we live our lives. Form3 provides those foundational blocks for the businesses as they look forward. We are a business which can now move the industry forward in terms of how payments are processed. We take some of the risk away from businesses that want to build and run technology, as we're ones that have done it for a number of institutions, and that means that we're able to free up more resource for banks and building societies and fintechs to try and do other things. In a world where scale is a big part of our business, we're processing a significant number of volume across the globe. We're in a position where we can leverage that scale to provide really top tier service to clients to make sure that resilience stays at the core and we have no downtime as a business going forward, which is what banks want and why they rely on us globally.
Absolutely. And we'll come on to more about what you do shortly. A really quick follow-up, if you don't mind on that. Nothing too deep, but I know we're talking about rebuilding modern payments infrastructure. I suppose I didn't ask the why almost. Why is now the time? Why is that necessary? Why is traditional infrastructure no longer suitable, hitting breaking point? And what does modern actually mean to you and Form3?
I think it's different by different market. If you think of the UK, faster payments has been here for a long time, more than 50 years. Some of the banks have systems that were developed at that time and actually have now been just updated systematically to the last 50 years. Replace it or bring in efficiency to the businesses, allow them to invest in new tools, look at AI and things that people want to do differently, and it'll give them different opportunities. I think also when you look globally, somewhere like the US, there's an opportunity where real-time payments isn't as embedded as it is in Europe, and therefore gives opportunity to build something new, not a replacement, to allow access to Fed Now and Fed Instant, which is something that as a big UK business that is now providing a lot of payments in Europe allows us to scale into the US.
Great. I mean, you mentioned those regions. We'll come on to that a little bit more, maybe dig a bit deeper into that. Obviously, all of those regions undergoing big payment overhauls. I know you touched on a little bit there, but how does it kind of impact how you run a business across those different jurisdictions? What are the kind of key approaches in each of those areas?
I think you have to understand that the businesses are so different. So when you think about how the UK works from a regulation perspective, faster payments was really pushed on by the regulators, and that's what's really driven it. Whereas in the US, that isn't the way the US has worked in terms of payments infrastructure. It's something that needs to be driven from the banks and regional banks themselves to be able to want to move forward rather than being mandated by the Fed or someone like that. So actually the way you think of it is different. I think also when you think of Europe, Europe clearly not being one country, SEPA is a different way of thinking about payments because SEPA technically is cross-border if you think about between the different countries. But actually, when we think of SEPA, it really is domestic in Europe. And so thinking about how a bank or a financial institution works, they really want access to SEPA to be able to provide services to all their customers across Europe. And that's something that we're able to do, which is very different to a single country solution like you have in the UK, an established one, or an evolving one like in the US.
I see. And you essentially remove those challenges, right? That's Form Three's existence, isn't it? I guess forming that kind of shield from regulatory and technical change. Maybe now's a good opportunity for your pitch, if you don't mind, in shorter terms. Maybe you can tell us about the technology behind that shield, and a little bit more about, I guess, Form Three as a business and what you're doing and how you're helping easing some of those challenges.
I think of the thing that separates us from our peers is really the single API access to our platform, which means if you come onto our platform, you'll be on the same platform as everybody else in the UK, in Europe, or in the US, which will mean that you'll be subject to the same updates that we do for all of our customers, which means customization isn't something that we've done and something that we don't really do because if there's a customization that's needed, we'll push it to all of our customers. So everybody's all working on the same platform, which means resilience is easier to be done when it's cross-market. It means we take away all of that risk in terms of remaining current because we will be providing the same platform to all the customers, which means that actually if you're on the other side of it, you can rely on the fact that your peers are operating in the same landscape, in the same controls, the same environment. As a business, we are obviously audited by our banks and financial institutions extensively, and therefore means that we are audited more than I can think of in my audit days. And actually, that is a good thing because that means that everybody understands what we are subject to, and we have to work to a standard which kind of surpasses our size as a business in normal way. You think of a business of our size.
Fantastic. And you launched in London, in the UK. I guess going back to that point, maybe give us some information. Tell us why you chose to launch in the UK. Why did you see that as a good testing ground, a good proving ground, or why was it the right market at that time to enter into and start the business?
I think that the UK was at that point still further ahead. I would say still is further ahead than others in the market. So what it meant at that point was we were really in the replacement phase, which meant when we were talking to banks at that point 10 years ago, we've just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. They already knew what the platform would be because they were already having their own systems to be able to connect to central infrastructure. We were a replacement, which meant I wouldn't say the pitch was easier, but they understood what we were trying to bring. Whereas actually trying to go into a new market where connections to central infrastructure through real-time payments is something new for them to learn and to develop, which makes it much harder to sell. Whereas in the UK, we knew that the UK market needed it. We knew that it was outdated. And by bringing something that was in the cloud, multi-cloud, meant that resilience would work and give us more options in the market, which is why we started the UK. And now it's about scale. So a UK business that is scaling globally is something that's exciting to be part of and a big reason of why I'm still at Form 3.
Absolutely, and you're growing quite a lot in the US. Is that right? That's a big kind of push area for you at the moment. Is that correct?
That is correct. So I think when I think of the US as the biggest single market, having lived there for 3 years, I think the idea of paying rent as I did by check is still quite outdated versus what we are seeing. So I think there is a view that eventually the US will adopt more real-time payments. We are seeing that. We are seeing more volume come through and more interest from clients. And I think once you hit that tipping point, it will really change how the market looks at real-time payments. And that's why it's exciting to be a business which has grown in the UK, scaled in the UK, has processed volume in the UK and Europe, and now processing in the US, proving that we can do it for big banks and fintechs who are global.
That's fantastic. And I guess the pace of change is really, as you say, is exciting to you because there's so much going on and so much to keep Form 3 busy and moving forwards, right?
And I think that's what is exciting even if you're on the financial side, I think on our side of the business or even on the engineering side, that we are trying to be innovative. We do want to focus on what separates us from our peers, so top class engineers who are able to do interesting work and build out new innovative solutions does make it a great place to work, and that's why we are still in a position to be able to push on in the UK.
How have you, we talked about your 2 decades, Benyam. I'm loath to bring that up again, and apologies for doing so in front of all our listeners and all of our watchers. But I guess I'm interested because, your excitement is apparent, right? You're really excited about what you do and you clearly love it and for good reason. But I suppose the question I'm always interested in when people have such deep experience is how you've seen this whole industry change over your career. What have been the kind of key drivers of change, and I suppose what keeps that excitement going for you and keeps you moving forwards?
I think what's exciting is how quickly it's changing. So,
Mm.
in a world where I left a big four company
Yeah.
12 years ago, I think what's interesting is how much the world has evolved through the schemes into PSPs and globally. I
Mm.
think the connections are really small. I was at Money 2020 a few weeks ago, and the number of people I had worked with in different organizations in the last 8, 9 years is really apparent. It
Mm.
is a point where you talk about AI, you talk about stablecoin. There's more things that we can do as a business going forward. But I think for us, it's all about the foundational blocks that drive the UK forward in Europe
Mm.
and the US in terms of really replacing existing platform infrastructure that clients have built, but also being able to bring scale and scale with the company.
This podcast is in partnership with Amazon Business. Amazon Business is your one-stop destination for everything your organization needs. Think of it as the Amazon you already know and love, but specifically re-engineered for the way you work. Amazon Business gives you access to business-only pricing on millions of items and quantity discounts that scale with your growth. It's about spending less time bogged down in those manual tasks and more time on what really matters. So head over to Amazon Business and make the power of Amazon work for you.
Great. So let's get back to that scaling and that strategy. We can pick up maybe on that future-facing strategy shortly, but one thing you mentioned is resilience when we were talking a little while ago. I wanted to ask you how resilience plays into your strategy. Obviously, it's key for you and for all of those institutions that you're working with. Maybe tell us about that and what you're building, what you're developing in that respect.
Yes, I think one of the things that differentiates us from a number of customers and companies in the market is
Mm.
really we are running live on three cloud providers at the same time.
Mm.
So we are in a position where we are constantly live on three. There's not one that's behind, it's actually constantly working, which means from a resiliency perspective, if one of the clouds went down, and you have seen if you last over the last 18 months, there has been instances where one or three of the big cloud providers has gone
Yeah.
down, that hasn't impacted any of our processing because we are running live across all three clouds,
Mm.
which means that we've had people test it and prove whether we can. We have
Mhm.
instances where the market's gone down in certain markets, and we can do that, which means resilience in a world where you are processing mortgage payments and processing things that are really key for customers underneath the banks or
Of
financial
course.
institutions. We do have that resilient layer, and we can prove it.
Mm.
And I think when you think of our earlier point around audit and being
Mm.
challenged by our customers, that we are able to prove that we are resilient and able to run live on three clouds. And I think that is a big differentiating factor. And we've been live on that for a good 3 years now.
Fantastic. And that's something that's pretty unique to the way you operate, is it?
Yes, it is. I think in a world where I think the views of kind of being on-prem obviously
Yeah.
was a while ago, and then it was to move to cloud, but to really be live on three clouds at the same time, I think is really unique as a business in our space.
Do you think the I mean, when we talk about finance and payments and banking, we often talk about legacy technology, legacy infrastructure, and things like that. I don't want to go down that road too much. We're here to talk about Form 3 and what you're doing, but do you think the appetite for change when it comes to technology, when it comes to working with Form 3s of this world from the banking sector, from those organizations is changing? Are you seeing a rapid kind of pace of change and evolution when it comes to technology adoption and innovation and so on?
Definitely. I think there's a real challenge now when you look at it in the market to try and be innovative and move forward. So what
Yeah.
banks and financial institutions are trying to do is free up resource. So
Mm.
free up resource to be able to go and look at the thing that will change the front end of their app to customers, or if you're a PSB thinking about how you work with different customers.
Yeah.
But you want your engineers and your the staff that you are employing to spend time trying to differentiate yourself in the market.
Mm.
If we can remove some of the back end that they are facing, that will allow them to free up resources, which is why in a world where you've got some founders thinking they can work across multiple customers or
Mm.
multiple clients, you've got people trying to be globally in so many places, we're trying to free up resource, and we can do that, and we've proven that we can do that by running full volumes for a significant number of banks.
Fantastic. And I guess when it comes to balancing strategic investment with financial backing, you're talking about growth. We've talked about that strategy moving forwards. How do you do that at Form 3? What's your kind of approach to that and your strategy for that?
I think it's an interesting one. I think strategic investment and financial investment is very different
Mm.
in a way in their objectives and what they want to do as a business. I think for us, we've always really had quite a balanced view across both. So having a strategic advisory board, which has our strategic investors on, and a financial board, which governs the business, means that we are quite balanced. But I think what's interesting about the strategic investment means that we are giving them an insight into how we want to move the business forward from a product perspective. It means our bigger customers who are investors can give us input into markets they want to see, products they want to see, and actually help drive some of the kind of product initiatives as a business, and also us to share product ideas. So I think that is quite interesting, whilst also having the balanced view of a business that wants to be profitable, wants to push forward, and wants to get to the next stage of growth. So having the balance, I think, is interesting, and the way that we do it works really well for us as a company. I spend a lot of time with all the investors across both sides, and it does work quite well to have a balance of making sure we can provide the right service to our strategic investors, whilst also being challenged to continue to grow and scale the business. It gives you a balanced view of how we move forward as a business.
Great. I mean, let me just ask you on that. I mean, from a CFO perspective, we have a lot of CFOs obviously listening and tuning in. I mean, I know you've discussed before. I've seen you talking before about the role of the CFO needing to be about acting more like a commercial partner than a traditional finance lead. I was just interested in that. Maybe you can tell me a bit more about the role of the modern CFO from your perspective and how you do that.
I think when you think of a successful CFO, I think they are hand in hand with the CRO, the revenue officer, in terms of how the business scales. Of course, you have to work a lot with the CEO and develop that relationship and work together. But working with a CRO where you work hand in hand, you understand opportunities that you can go after as a business. You think about where you can take more calculated bets to drive the business forward, I think is where it becomes exciting to be a CFO. Having been a controller and auditor for a number of years, I can do the BAU parts of the business, and I think that's expected, closing audits on time and those kind of things. But what's interesting is trying to spend the time to scale the business. I think that differentiates you, and I think that's what gets you excited in the morning. That's what I like to do and where I like to spend my time.
I really like that, and I suppose that experience, you said you've got quite a broad depth of experience there, haven't you? Does that influence your approach to the role? You touched on it there, but I guess that's pretty valuable, having worked across those different kind of areas, and you've also worked for different organisations as well.
And I think different organisations at different stages of growth. Actually, from a big multinational to a scaling business that's a little bit bigger than us now, I think you have different perspectives. So when we think about new product initiatives or new markets to enter, there are learnings I've had in my career that I can pass into the product teams. There are relationships I have in the market to help define that. And I think that's what gives you more insight into the business. I think that is one of my key parts of my role, is to bring that into the business. Where are valuations? Where are what does the market value over profitability versus growth? Those are things where I think the dynamic CFO should be spending time and bringing that insight into the business.
And do you think that role is changing more broadly anyway? I mean, obviously you can't speak for every CFO out there, but do you think that's a shift that's happening broadly, generally speaking?
I think so. I think the bar is raising. So I think the CFO challenge to be a CFO in a seat, 10 years, normally 2.5 years, so doing longer tenure than that means the bar is rising. You are expected to do more. If you look at listed companies, how much a CFO talks about the market, I think it is a big pressure on them. And therefore you are expected to be able to balance the risk from a revenue perspective and the CEO is sit in the middle and give a balanced view of how the company is performing. And that's one of the big challenges that I have.
Brilliant. Well, let's talk about it. I mean, with all that said and with all that in mind, what's your focus? Before we look at, I suppose, Form 3 growing and look at the future, I mean, what's your focus as CFO now and into the longer term? What are you kind of looking at? What are those challenges that you talked about, and how are you going to address those?
I think the biggest challenge for me now is capital allocation. So trying to understand really as a business where we should be spending our resources. So in a business where 10 years in, we've scaled and grown, it's how do we start to determine which is the best that we should go after? How much risk can we take in terms of revenue being ahead of target, cost being behind target, how much excess cash can I reinvest? And understand where we should start thinking about new bets. But also in another way, assessing the challenges that we've given ourselves in the last few years and whether they are successful, and determining whether it's time to shift away from certain initiatives and shift into new ones. So in a world where we are seeing big spend on tokens, we are seeing challenges around how you scale, trying to understand that is a given in a business that wants to scale, where can we still manage the cost base to be able to still hit our targets? So I think it's an evolving challenge over the next 2 to 3 years.
Fantastic. And do you think that there'll be new markets on the cards? I mean, we've talked about growth in the US. We've talked about where you're at in the UK and Europe. I assume Form 3, you've the scope to go everywhere, right? This is a common challenge that banks are facing.
I think it is. And I think actually as real-time payments really gets more embedded into more markets, I think that will be the aim, to move and cover more of the markets. I think a lot of it is around timing. So understand actually whether the market is ready to really adopt real-time payments, whether the market is large enough to really involve the investment that we need to be successful. But I think that is something that will have to happen as businesses scale. Everyone is more global. Everybody is expecting to have one provider and cover more areas of the globe than just UK, Europe, and US. So I think it's a natural challenge, and I think it will continue to be one that's levied at us for the next few years at least.
And how do you assess that readiness? Is it good old fashioned communicating with stakeholders, meeting customers? I'm interested in how you assess how those markets are developing.
I think one of the things for us is we are really working with global financial institutions and global banks. So we can go out globally and have conversations. So going out and going to a market and actually talking to, the bank's local staff will always help. But I also think you need local resource. So you need to go out and actually have local relationships. So we are challenged to be out on the road, out and about, and talking to different markets to understand where it would be most appropriate for us to scale. That is a challenge, and that continues to be one. We've been now in our last 3 markets for the good 3-4 years. This is where the business will move to. So we need to be clear on how you start to distinguish the bets.
Amazing. Well, I mean, looking ahead, what do you think that the big trends will be for the banking sector that I guess will influence you? I mean, this moving from old infrastructure to new is a perennial problem, and it won't go away anytime soon. But is there anything else that you think will be a step change in the industry or in the sector?
I think what's happening is there's a real push now to prove how you are becoming more efficient as a business.
Okay.
So prove how you are adopting AI to become more efficient, and how you are trying to move your business forward to allocate resources to the most strategic value as you can. So I think as that happens, people will challenge themselves more and more on how can they move their business more forward, which will be outsourcing certain privileges. And actually, when we can start to show that we are covering more rails and more markets, it will mean that people will look at transitioning more to one single provider. That is interesting for us as a business, interesting for us as we scale globally, and I think will challenge companies to be different. You will need to be able to go out and be innovative faster, to go out to do different products, different markets, and giving us more of the older legacy system will allow them to do that.
That's so exciting, and it sounds like there's enough to keep you excited for the foreseeable future.
I think so. I think there's in our industry, we are really seeing a pick up in terms of how real-time payments are seen, in terms of how the markets are looking. And I think it's almost, what's the end of your ambition? Because ultimately it's, can you prove to grow and scale and continue to grow? I don't think there's a natural end point as people move towards real-time payments.
Let me just ask you one thing. I always ask our guests this. I think it's an interesting take. I mean, bearing in mind everything we've said, you are a CFO, so perfect. Let's do it. I mean, what for you is the key takeaway for CFOs listening now? What for you is the key piece of information that leaders should be focusing on? Where should they be looking? Where should they be really looking to reinvent what they're doing or their approach to business?
I think the big thing as CFO is efficiency. The real thing you're supposed to be driving as CFO is trying to make the company that you're part of as efficient as you can, to be able to go out and drive the strategic value of the business, to drive the EV of the business up. So by looking at opportunities to outsource to more efficient providers, by using AI to try and eliminate some roles and bring some things in-house, will mean that you'll be able to go out and invest and do more exciting things. And I think a CFO who can start to price those different options and understand those risk-based decisions of how you do that will be able to push their business forward. And that's why I think you're seeing CFOs rise in prominence in terms of doing things that are not just typical controller-related tasks.
Yeah, it's more of a strategic value enabler, value adder to a business now, right?
And I think that's why the conversations, which were predominantly CEO-led, if you think like 5-10 years ago, are now being passed to CFO to do the initial parts of it and overlaid by the CEO, which is different to how it was 10-15 years ago when my dad was a CFO.
Fantastic. It's in the family, Benyam. I didn't know that. That's amazing. Is that where the inspiration came from to take up the career?
Yes, I think it's one of the things that seeing him be a CFO as just a CFO in the market was one thing that did definitely push me into it. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, look, I mean, what a fantastic conversation we've had. And we only mentioned AI right at the end, I realize. It tends to dominate every conversation.
I know,
but I didn't ask you about it.
It is a hard one. I think it's one when you walk around the stands at Money 2020 early June, or you hear AI stablecoin more than anything else, and trying to understand what is the most appropriate story in terms of AI and how you're adopting it, because everybody seems to want to pivot to it, but actually how much are firms actually using AI versus saying that they're using AI, I think is the challenge.
I think that's really interesting. And I think the same. It's about cutting through the noise. I don't know how you do that as a CFO, diligence, understanding, research, is that it?
Yeah, that's it. And I think it's also having the relationships in those companies and in peers to really understand how people are really using it. So going underneath the marketing and trying to understand how are you using it, being at conferences, being at conversations with different groups to understand, are you really seeing that change in the business?
So much to play for. I'm not going to quiz you anymore on AI, Benyam, not give your secrets away anyway. I think you've set out a fantastic future for Form 3. What an amazing conversation. Sadly, that's it from this episode of the Finance Chief podcast. It was a great one. I loved having you on. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And it just leaves me to say thank you to our guest again, Benyam Hagos, CFO at Form 3. Benyam, hope you enjoyed it. Hope we covered everything you wanted to, and I hope you had a fantastic time.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Matt.
Really grateful for you joining us, and it's been a good one. But yeah, sadly, that's it for this week from the Finance Chief podcast. We will be back with you next week for another installment. In the meantime, remember you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. So please have a listen, subscribe, share it with your friends, share it with your fellow CFOs and finance leaders, and let's share some of the love and share some of the insights. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to Benyam, and take care. We will see you on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.